Hello everybody, so a bit of a different video, but something that's really always intrigued me is sort of, you know, the UFO phenomenon, things like that. So, I've spent like 20 years or something reading quite a lot of books, getting various documents off the internet, checking out different websites, people's accounts, things like that. So it's just a hobby of mine. But one of the probably the most interesting case I find is the case of this chap that you can see here on the right, called Bob Lazar. Robert Lazar was supposedly hired to work at Area 51 and a place on Groom Lake, a few miles away from actually the main part of Area 51, a place called S4. Generally, the US government officially acknowledged Area 51 for the first time during a court case. You might be familiar with it. It's where some employees at Area 51 got ill because of contaminated by some kind of radioactive material. And they took the government to court, and they had to officially acknowledge its existence. Everybody knew, you know, everybody knows that it's a real base. You can see from that photograph, it's on the satellite photos. So it's on Groom Lake, a part of Nevada, and obviously it was chosen. That area was chosen because of its isolation. It's easier to guard, if you will. But this chap here, Robert Lazar, the claims that he makes, Area 51 really was used to develop secret technology, like the stealth bomber. From the information that seems to be true, no actual alien spaceships or what have you, recovered discs, was at the actual Area 51 facility. It's a separate part called S4, which this man claims is like a few miles away, which was built into the side of a mountain. Now, this chap, Robert Lazar, he was hired to work there in the late 80s to back engineer recovered discs. He says he doesn't know how the discs were recovered, but his job was to try and figure out how they worked, what the principle of them was, and can they duplicate it. I'll put a link in the description of an interview with him. There's loads available. If you type Bob Lazar in on YouTube, there's loads, but it's probably the best one, I think. But we'll just have a little clip from that.
On this particular occasion, it pulled up to one of the hangar doors, which were normally closed, and the last one was open. We came out, and I saw the disc in the hangar. Upon seeing it, it struck me that, well, this explains all the UFO sightings. Not thinking that it was an extraterrestrial craft, that this must have been some advanced form of fighter that we've been working on for years, and, you know, people have just caught it being tested, so on and so forth. And it never even occurred to me, even though I was looking at an extraterrestrial vehicle, that, you know, this wasn't man-made.
When did you realize the craft was not of earthly origin?
Well, it probably really hit me when I got inside the craft and looked around and began to understand how the craft was operated, and finally grasped the whole project as a whole, as what we were doing, the fact that we weren't building this thing, we were trying to find out how it was made. We were back engineering it.
Now, from the surface of it, it would seem a ridiculous story, wouldn't it? I happen to believe it. You know, I've read loads of stuff about it. I can't be sure, and no one can unless you're actually this guy or whoever else is involved in it. But as you can see from that little clip, it comes across as being very genuine. Anybody with any kind of interest in sort of body language and things like that, although it's no exact science, he exhibits no specific traits of being deceptive. And obviously you tend to think that if you were going to come up with this claim, you'd probably master that anyway. But there's the gist of it is, he says that he was hired there in the late 80s to do what he did, and then he decided to, for what, this is something I can't figure out, he decided to take his friends to see one of the test flights that he was aware of when he wasn't working and on the outskirts of the base, and then he got found and interrogated and basically threatened, and that was the end of his relationship with the people that did it. Now, if you this chap here, George Knapp, is, as it says there, an investigative journalist in, like, you know, Nevada, that area, that state. What happened was, when Bob Lazar got rumbled, if you will, he was concerned for his life, so what he did was, to try and protect himself, he approached this journalist and said, I've been working at this base on these discs, and I'm in fear of my life. I need to protect myself by coming forward with this story, in that if they were going to get rid of him, it would seem to give him a bit of credence. So in other words, if they were after hurting him or doing something to him after he came out in public, and if he then disappeared, it would seem to legitimise what he's saying and put them under more pressure, if you get what I mean. That was his basics for doing it. Initially, when he was interviewed, he had a blacked out face. It was a bit of a warning to the people, as if to say, you know, if you don't leave me alone, I will eventually come forward and give my name and exposure. And that's what he ended up doing eventually. Now, since that time, the government have never officially denied his story. They've never come out and said that's nonsense. But then again, you know, why would you? That's not specific proof. But what's kind of interesting is, with this chap, everything that he says, a lot of what he can say can be verified. Where he's worked previously at Los Alamos, that's where he was hired from. And what happened to him after that, if you want to watch some of the videos and interviews with George Knapp, after he became public, they tried to erase his past, his education, his work, and the people at Los Alamos virtually said they'd never heard of Bob Lazar, but he did work there, and they were trying to erase his records, and they found him in like a phone book. He was listed in a phone book, but yet if he spoke to anybody from Los Alamos, they said he never worked there. It was all kind of a conspiracy, or so it would seem, and obviously people love getting their teeth into stuff like that, don't they? Now, in case you haven't guessed, I'm no scientist, and a lot of the stuff is, I've no shame in admitting, is way over my head with regard to how he explained that this craft operated. This is, from the details he's given, this is kind of a sketch of what he says this craft was like, and it was powered, well, the propulsion system is like anti-gravity. I understand the very basic principles. So what they're saying is that this reactor here in the middle powers these gravity amplifiers, and the way it travels is totally alien. That just totally alien to how we understand propulsion. We understand propulsion is that you have a thrust behind you to some degree and propels you forward. This works totally differently. So you have these three gravity amplifiers, and what they do is they create a gravity distortion in front of the craft. So usually if it's travelling around a planet, you'd have one of these amplifiers that would create a small distortion in front of it. So what it would do, it would create gravity. What does gravity do? It pulls you towards something. So it would create gravity in front of it, and therefore the craft is propelled. It's constantly chasing that gravity. So another way of looking at it would be, if you put, let's say that there's a cup on a bed. The cup is obviously standing on top of the bed, but if you put a heavy bowling ball in front of the cup will then fall down towards the bowling ball. It's kind of like that. So there's a gravity distortion in front of the craft, and it's chasing it for infinity. That's how it's powered. What it says is, in the information that has been given, when it travels through space, 3 of these gravity amplifiers work in tandem. So the craft that you can see there would then lift up on its belly. I mean, there's no such thing as lifting up in space, because there's no up, down, left or right if you think about it. But what it would do from a perspective of where we are now, it would tilt up on its belly, and then these 3 amplifiers would focus to a single point and create a distortion, and then it would travel that way. But because gravity bends time and space, it's not travelling in a sense that you would think that it's not travelling from point A to point B. It's creating, in effect, I think the closest way of describing it, it's like creating a wormhole. It's bending the fabric of space and time. Now, all that is way over my head, but it's fascinating, isn't it? So, I mean, is this guy telling the truth? What you can't disprove what he's saying, and I don't suppose you can prove it either. This is one document that says here that he worked for the United States Department of Naval Intelligence. Now, these codes have been verified. This employs identification numbers. Some checks were made, and there's documentaries about it, and basically they were found to be genuine codes. And when secret sort of identification numbers listed as top secret in IRS, things like that, now this is just a document, and you could argue that documents can be faked. Of course documents can be faked, but the sort of information that's provided, journalists have done checks into the code numbers and basically got sort of met with really sort of aggression at the people at the top of the chain, and saying, well, how do you know what these codes are? What are you doing asking me? It's really, really interesting. It just goes to sort of back up his claims. If you look into his background as well, it would make sense that someone like he would be hired. He was interested in like rocket cars. He was known to be a bit of a rebel. He was, very well educated, very intelligent man, as you can imagine. It was like they needed someone to think outside of the box. He was given, if you watch the documentary, he was given briefing documents when he first entered the base. He didn't know, when he first went there, he didn't really know what he was working on, and they gave him briefing documents and he was reading it. And as you saw from the clip earlier, he didn't really figure out what was going on until he went inside the craft or looked inside it and realised it wasn't made for humans. In the documents, the briefing documents that he was given, as you'll see from the documentary, if you take time to watch it, it does say that these aliens that the original owners of the craft, it doesn't say how the government got hold of them. And apparently there were like 9 discs that he saw. The typical grey aliens from like, UFO lore. They've become part of popular culture, haven't they? The big eyes. He says he saw a picture of them in the briefing document, and apparently this is really interesting. They originate from a star system, Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2, which is a binary star system located 37 light years from Earth. Obviously, it's a real star system that's been identified, otherwise it wouldn't be named. That's apparently where they originate from. Now, there are other cases where this star system has been identified as being home to these aliens. Now, one of the first, I think it was one of, if not the first documented UFO cases of sort of alien abduction, is in the was in 1961, where Betty and Barney Hill were basically driving across America in New Hampshire, September the 19th, 1961, when they believe they were abducted by extraterrestrials. Now, it's been made into a film. James Earl Jones, I believe, played the male lead. It was a black man and a white woman who were a couple, and they saw this craft. Anyway, it was like one of the first documented sort of by credible people. Credible as in they're not. There's no reason for them to make it up. They weren't insane or anything like that. Now, what's interesting about it, I've sort of found. Look at the picture on the right here. That was what was drawn by Betty Hill, I believe. She was basically taken under hypnosis, and she drew the picture on the right is what she drew. That is apparently what the aliens showed her where they were from, and she drew that from memory under hypnosis. Now, for a long time, no one could sort of decipher it, and someone actually tried to figure out where it was from, and they actually figured out that the star map closely, you can even see it yourself. This is Zeta Reticuli 1, where my mouse key is now, the cursor, sorry, closely resembles what she wrote. The map there, it's pretty much the same. So what they're saying is the UFO investigator sort of figured out that what she drew was a map of Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2, the two map stars that you can see, which is apparently where they were from, which is also where Bob Lazar says that the briefing document said they were from. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's definitely true, does it? You've got to remain sceptical but open-minded. It could be that, this person figured out that's where everybody's saying it's from, and, we'll say it's from Zeta Reticuli, but that star map was during the 60s. And it does resemble the same place. I mean, you could loosely argue it could become, it could come from anywhere, but it's quite an intriguing part of the tale. So, I mean, if you think about the actual implications of it, if this is actually true, it's remarkable. If it's true, it's the biggest story in history, isn't it? Just think about it. The government have got these discs. Apparently, they first obtained it through the Roswell crash. How they got hold of working crafts, we don't know. But, I mean, if you look at it logically, right, I think most people, you'd have to be a total moron to think that we're the only people, that we're the only intelligent life in the universe. How vast the universe is, the mind cannot grasp. It's just fucking crazy. So, let's just say everybody can agree, right, that we are not alone. If we can all agree on that, what are the chances that there isn't another? Let's just take our galaxy, just our galaxy. There's hundreds of millions of stars, hundreds of millions of stars in our galaxy alone. Let's just look at our galaxy. What are the chances that there isn't sentient life somewhere within our galaxy with how vast it is? Now, what are the chances then that there isn't sentient life somewhere within our galaxy that are hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions, ahead of us, technologically? So, in one respect, it's kind of more unbelievable to assume that no one's paid a passing interest in us. With regard to how vast the universe is, I don't believe life is that affluent. I don't think you're going to get it in every star system, because if you think about all the ingredients that are needed to have an environment where life can thrive, it's pretty rare. But because the galaxy and the universe is so vast, there will still be so much life out there. So if they have indeed visited us, to what end? Let's just say that the government did know this, which I think they do. Why would they divulge it to the rest of the world? They wouldn't, would they? You know, let's think about this logically. They'd say, right, okay, there's been alien life visiting us for years. We don't really know much about them. We don't know what they want. We're a little bit scared. We thought you'd like to know. It's not going to happen, is it? Part of what Bob Lazar read in his briefing document says that this is where it gets fucking scary. These aliens have altered our DNA 65 times over the last 10,000 years to make us what we are, to make us a sentient being. Also, if you think about it, there's like the missing link with regard to our evolution. Where does that missing link? Why is there a missing link? You know, where does it come from? Is it that we were altered by these people to make them what we are? Is it all part of the universe's design? It's fascinating, isn't it? There was an uncomfortable amount of information on DNA methods and viral weaponry. It is speculated that viruses, right, okay. I read a book, or tried to, that said that these creatures were, what they were doing, they were trying to, it gets a bit weird. It was called the Greys and the Harvesting of the Human Souls, and what it was saying was they created us to be containers for like our human souls, and they were trying to like harvest them because they are cloned genetic beings or something. But that book was a bit way over my head. But the more we delve into it, the more unbelievable it would actually seem, wouldn't it? But yeah, there's mysteries within. There's parts of our DNA, and this is all true. There's parts of our DNA that we're unsure about. There's like percentage of it that just defy mystery, and we don't know where they've come from. And it would make sense that if they've been, you know, the missing link with regard to our evolution and what made us the sentient being that we are, it's fascinating, isn't it? So we get back to, does this guy have any credibility? You've got to figure that out for yourself if you're at all interested. Me personally, I believe it. There is one thing I don't understand. When he was threatened, I don't understand why they didn't just kill him. They apparently had a gun against his head in a room and said, you know, what the fuck are you playing at? You know, getting these people to see the test flights and stuff like that of the craft. And they threatened him, and they threatened his family, and they were like harassing him. And obviously then he went to the press, but I just don't understand why they didn't just kill him initially. It could all be part of a disinformation act, a disinformation tactic to try and leak information to the public. He himself is even open to that. But in interviews, he says that there's absolutely no way on Earth that technology could have been made by us on this planet. He says he's 100% certain that it was made by extraterrestrials. He said there's just no way that we could ever hope to build something like that. Apparently the reactor within that craft generates more power than all the nuclear plants in America put together in one reactor that is the size of a coffee table. It's remarkable, but not unbelievable in my opinion. It kind of depends how open-minded you are. There are UFO. The guy George Knapp, the investigative journalist, he believes the story. There are some prominent UFO researchers who think he's a liar. There are some prominent UFO researchers who think he's telling the truth. You've got to make your own mind up. But I thought it'd be worth sharing because it's a really interesting story. It's as intriguing as it is disturbing as well, because it opens up so many disturbing aspects if it's true. There is a documentary on Netflix called Unacknowledged. It's brilliant. Watch it. Yeah, I can't recommend that enough. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there, guys, and thanks for watching. Make any comments, let me know if you actually believe it or not. It'd be really interesting to know what you thought. Let me know if you've enjoyed the video, and thank you very much. I will speak to you soon.